Hello, my name is Isaac Hubble, and I'm part of the Robo Raiders FTC, Team 7129, and I've got Joe here with me, an FTC alumni and engineering student at SIUE. What experience have you had with drive teams and FTC?
Yeah, so I was on or related to the drive team for every year that I was in the program. I was in it 4 years. The first year, my first year in FTC, I was on the drive team. I was the driver for the robot, and so that was a really, really fun experience for that whole event. The year after that, I switched over to be in programming, and so I would kind of follow the drive team around with the laptop and make any kind of changes to the autonomous code or any changes to the teleop that they needed during or before an event. And I would also watch the matches to make sure the autonomous was working effectively, and so I could make any changes to that during the time in between. The third year I was in the program, I was not on the drive team, but I served as the media person taking the pictures and the videos for the team. And during that time I was able to watch the team compete on the field, and if there were any things I noticed that the other drive coach didn't notice, I was able to talk with the team and we were able to correct those mistakes from my watching and recording and such. My fourth year I was one of the drive coaches for the team, and we did very well that year, and it was I think we did a very good job for the drive team that year. So those are my experiences in FTC with the drive team so far.
So why are drive teams so important?
Yeah, so the drive team is a really critical component of your time in the program. You know, it is a robotics competition that you're going to, and your drive team is a team that kind of represents you to the crowd, to the other teams during the whole event. You know, and they're the ones driving the robot on the field. And another reason why the drive team is important is because of how expensive the matches that you're going to play really are when you think about it. If you take the cost of your event, which is sometimes like $250 or whatever for some of the earlier events, and you divide that by the number of matches you play, which is like at minimum 5 matches, you know, you're coming out to quite a bit of money per match for the amount of time that you're playing there. So you want to have a drive team that's going to be competitive for that, so you have a good investment of that money, right? But then it's also important for if you want to advance, if you want to win the competition, you need to have a drive team that's prepared, that's ready to rock and roll when they get to the competition and put that robot down on the field, right?
Mm-hmm. Awesome. What kind of structure do you recommend for a drive team?
So there are a few different schools of thought when it comes to setting up your drive team. So what most teams do is they have 2 drivers, you know, a driver and an operator for the robot, and then they have a drive coach. And that works really pretty well, and that's probably one of the most competitive models you can have for your team, because everyone who's on the team has the most time possible to practice the robot, to get familiar, and to be able to perform more effectively as a result of that. You have risks that go along with that, because if you've only trained 2 people to drive the robot, then if one of them gets sick or can't make it to the competition or whatever, then there's going to be a problem because your performance is going to go down because you haven't trained other people. So what we did the last year, which I think was one of the best models we've done, was we had 2 drivers, a driver-operator, and then we had a backup. You could do either role, so if one of them got sick, we still had someone who could step in. And then we had 2 drive coaches instead of 1 drive coach. And the reason we had 2 was so that we could have one up on the field running with the team, the other one out in the competition area talking with the teams we're going to be competing with next, scouting out the teams you're going up against so we knew what strategy we needed to win that next round. So we had 2 people whose roles were coaching the team, and sometimes we would watch each other coach, and so like you're detached from the team. When you're watching, you can have more lessons learned as a result of that. And so that was the model we used. 2 drivers, a backup, 2 drive coaches. And that worked really well for our team. We were a larger team when we did that, but it worked pretty effectively. Other models that people have had, 2 drive teams, 2 drive coaches. The problem with that is if you've got differences in skill, there's going to be rivalry that comes up from that because you've got different scores objectively, and that's a problem for some teams. And then you've got the most inclusive option where everyone drives the robot, and the problem with that is you're not going to get the same level of performance as you probably would if you had just one drive team driving, because everyone has less experience as a result of everyone else driving, because time exists and is finite.
How do you recommend choosing a drive team?
So there are a few different things that we've done in the past when I was on the team to choose a drive team, which I thought were very effective. We had drive team tryouts for one of those, where once we built our drivetrain for the robot and we had the tele-op working and we could drive it around, we put like little tape marks on the field and like a little maze or whatever, and so is how effectively can you drive the robot through this maze, through these obstacles, to kind of get a feel for how effective you'd be at controlling the robot, right? And then we'd like play loud music or have people yell and scream or whatever while we're doing it, because competition is very loud. If you can perform when it's quiet, but you can't when it's loud, you're not going to be as effective as you could be when you're a driver on the team. So drive team tryouts, got the drivetrain, you try them out, right? And then another thing we did was we would do the game manual, and we'd read through the game manual, and then we'd make a quiz about it. A few of the team members or a few of the mentors would make a quiz from the game manual, and then just give it to the team, just like a 10-question quiz or something like that, multiple choice, and then they could find out how well the team members knew the game, because if you don't really know the game rules super well, you might do something kind of sketchy on the field and get some penalties, and you don't want that. You want the drive team members to be willing to put in work beforehand to learn the game. And then also you need to look at level of availability for the drive team members, because if you want to be really competitive, you're going to need to put in more time to drive practice before the events happen, and that just takes another level of availability from team members.
What are the responsibilities of a drive team?
Yeah, so at competition, the drive team is responsible. You've got your driver and your operator and your coach. They're responsible for putting the robot up on the field after they've queued up. So you've got a queuer comes to you, they bring your team and your robot, you go and you queue for the matches you're going to be up in, and then you go and you put your robot on the field and you run your matches. And so the drive team's responsible for that whole process, making sure that they're ready to go, that the robot's connected. So your drive team needs to know how the connection works, how the software works in order to run the robot. If something goes wrong, they need to hopefully have some kind of experience or knowledge in how to troubleshoot some of those problems, because the FTA is not always going to be there to help. So you want to be able to do that some on your own. So that's one responsibility. They're going to be driving it up on the field. They're representing themselves to other teams and to judges, because multiple times judges have come up to us, like when we've been queuing, and we've talked to them during that time, or when we're practicing on the practice field, they've come and talked to us. So you want your drivers to be able to answer questions about the robot as well, instead of just know how to drive, right?
How should a drive team prepare for a competition?
So there are a few different ways you could prepare for the competition. So what we would do normally is, you've got your drivers and you've got your coach. You'd have them run multiple practice rounds, similar to the programming team, where they'd run their autonomous multiple times and test how that goes. You would run your drive team, and you would have the drive coach, or if you have two drive coaches, the second drive coach takes data on how the team is doing and what they're doing effectively. You put in a little Excel spreadsheet, and you can track how the team's doing, right, based on points, right? And you can practice if there's a certain kind of cycle that you do multiple times. You could have the operator practice doing that cycle. So for a system that has an intake and then it has a lift and a dump part, knowing how to control the joysticks to make that whole thing work more effectively, more fluidly as your drive team is something you'd want to practice and prepare with. Another component is the drive coach preparing for competition. So reading the game manual is critical for the drive coach being prepared, but there's also another component to that, which is the forum online for FTC, the game updates forum. With that, they have updates to the game, people ask questions, teams ask questions on the forums, and then the game design committee, they go and put answers out to those questions, and sometimes they're very game-changing answers that teams don't know about when they show up at competition. So if you want to be more competitive at competition, you want to know what you're doing, right, and not come in foggy or whatever, you need to be reading that, especially if you're the drive coach. The entire team doesn't need to read that. There's normally a lot of just garbage that's on there, but there are some really important things that if you miss, that's going to be a problem. So you want your drive coach at least to be reading that.
What are the roles of a drive coach in general?
Yeah, so the drive coach is kind of a role that a lot of teams don't really have a good grasp of, or they're not making the best use they can out of their drive coach. So before competition, the drive coach should be obviously learning the rules, reading the forums in order to know what's going on, what the rules are exactly. Before they get up to the field, they should be collaborating with their alliance partner to come up with an effective strategy for their autonomous and their teleoperated portions of the game. And they should also be investigating, scouting out, finding out information about the teams that will be opposing them on the other alliance, so that they know what they need to do in order to win that round, right? They need to know who they're going to be playing off against. And then when they're in the actual round, some teams will have their drive coach do nothing at all and just kind of spectate and watch. Some teams will have their drive coach micromanage the drivers, and that doesn't really work. So if they're not doing anything at all, there's not real benefit for them being there aside from them watching close up. If they're micromanaging, the team's probably going to be performing slower because the drivers aren't running off their instinct and their knowledge and their skill. They're running off instructions being fed to them by another person who's only watching like one thing at a time. So the proper role for the drive coach during the round is to get out of the way of the drivers, to get them information about what's going on the field. So like the most important thing for me when I'm a drive coach was calling out time in basically like every 15 seconds or so, letting the drive team know we got a minute 30 seconds left, or 15 seconds till end game, or it's end game now. Then we've got, like, when we get to like 10 seconds, then it's like counting down from 10 for the drive team to know what to do, so that they kind of have an idea if they can get this last score in, or if they need to go hang or do something else in that game. So you've got that kind of component there. The drive coach gets out of the way and gets information to the team. And if there's some big strategy shift that needs to happen, the drive coach would be the one to make that call during the round. But normally the goal is to let the drivers run effectively. You've practiced enough to where they can do it, so let them do it, right? That's kind of the role that the drive coach should play, in my experience.
How do you make the best use of time during a competition?
Right, so normally when you're on the drive team, you're normally running around a lot in order to prepare for your matches. So if you're a drive coach, you're going and talking to the teams you're going to be competing with in the future and getting a plan put in place for what you're going to do in autonomous and teleop portions of the game. So you need to be doing that. As a drive coach, you're also looking at what the other teams that you're going to be going up against, how they're ranked during the day, what their robot kind of does, just in general, so you kind of know what to expect when you go up against them. So you've got those things. And then the drive team, normally they'll be driving the robot on the field. When they get done, they're going to bring it back to the pit area or to the drive or to the practice field, and they'll be doing modifications or maintenance on the robot. You've got probably your programming team that might want to make changes to the autonomous if it didn't work properly in the last round. So you've got that going on as well. And normally there's not much downtime for a drive team at competition, but when there is, you can chill at the pit area or talk with other teams that you might want to be on an alliance with later on during the event. So those are a few different things to be working on during the competition. It's not to say there's no downtime whatsoever, but if you don't feel ready for the next round, there's work you can do to prepare and feel more confident when you go into that.
Would you be able to share a lesson that you learned while you were on the drive team that impacted how you were a drive coach in the future?
Yeah, so probably one of my most memorable experiences from being on the drive team was one of our first competitions, one of the first competitions we had. And in that we had, there was a flag that you had to lift up by spinning this little dial thing in the front of it, this little crank in the front, and then there was a hanging bar. And so the situation was, we were going to go and hang on the bar, and we had our alliance partner going and trying to lift the flag, and then at the end they were going to try to go and double hang with us to get extra points. And so in that situation, we had our drive coach, and he was looking at the time, and he's like, there's not time left to do that, and so he said, no hang to the other team, basically to say, don't go hang, but he said, no hang. And when it's really loud in the room, you don't know exactly what people are saying, and so what I think the other alliance heard, and what they told us they heard, was go hang instead of no hang. And so what they did was they left the flag only about halfway raised, so we lost a few points there. They went and drove around to try to get onto the hanging bar when there really wasn't much time left at all. And as a result of that, they pushed us over the line, and they didn't get hung on the bar, and they pushed us over the line, so we lost our points for our hang, we lost the points for the for the flag, and then we also like knocked this balance beam out of alignment, so we lost like bonus points for that too. So it was just a horrible situation, and it all came down to, we said exactly the right thing, no hang, but when you say something, it can be misheard by other people, and we said no, they heard go. That's something to think about. When you're saying things, people might hear it incorrectly, and then they're going to go and do that. So you need to try to organize how you're going to say your words to where it can't be misheard, it can't be misrepresented, and that's really important for a drive coach when you're working with other teams or when you're working with your team. You know, be able to be precise in your speech with what you're saying. So it might have been better to say stop, or keep doing the flag, or cancel hanging, or something like that. It might have been better to do something like that. And then also another lesson I learned while being a drive coach was not to put your hands over the field, because sometimes I get a little more intense with my hands, so I'm like putting my hands out there. So don't reach over the field whenever you're on the drive team at all, because refs will call you on that, and it's not a cool time. So,
Well, thank you, Joe, and thank you all for watching.
Thank you for watching this video on the drive team with Joe, an engineering student at SIUE. This is our 11th video in our Game On series. The next week's video will be on design reviews. Stay tuned. Bye.